Hi, and welcome back to our discussion series where we're walking through and breaking down the production process and technical decision making on our game Night Run, which is out on the Epic Games Store on October 23rd for free. So please check it out. I'm Matt Schell, and this is Josh Vaughan, who's the lead developer here at Thousand Ant. And in this segment, I want to dive into the process of getting the bike feel to where we wanted it. You know, as we mentioned in the previous segment, this is a game where we really put a lot of effort into some dimensions and really didn't into others, right? So it's kind of spiky in terms of its strengths and weaknesses, or, you know, the areas where we put effort and didn't put effort, which I think as a small team is a viable strategy, right? To say, let's try to make a couple of things that are as strong as we can make them, and then just basically not do the other things at all. And so the bike handling, right, the feel, well, we could separate the handling and the feel because I think those are two kind of dimensions of the same experience, but getting the experience of driving the bike and feeling, having that feel both like you were in control, that it felt fast, that it felt good, was really, really critical, right? Because this is the moment-to-moment thing that people are doing. And we went through quite a few iterations to get there. And so, you know, the way we started with a really, really basic, in the prototype version of the game, this was when I was just working on it by myself, I had a bike controller from the asset store that was really simple and rudimentary, basically put no effort into making it feel good. Which I think in the prototype stage was appropriate, right? It allowed me to get the skeleton of the whole thing together. But then when we moved into building the production version of the game, we knew, okay, we got to get rid of this and we got to make something that feels really good, which was Josh's responsibility, because it's definitely not something I can do.
Well, I mean, I would say that I think almost anybody can do almost anything. It's really just a question of how long.
How long is it going to take? It could take a long time.
Yeah, I would never want to stymie anybody from like trying stuff out. Just, you know, be prepared to pay the cost. That's all. You know, and the cost really in anything development focused is more time and effort than anything else. So, you know, whether you're, you know, if you see people doing stuff really fast, just realize they've already probably been speed running that for 10 years.
Quite a lot of effort into it.
Yeah. And, you know, in the same way that we only wanted to kind of invest a lot of effort into certain aspects of this game,
Yeah.
you know, we did invest a pretty significant chunk of development time into building, rebuilding, and otherwise getting to a point where there was a control for this that felt good. That was you know, just, you know, it needed to be really fun to control.
Yeah.
It needed to be something that you know it was really core to the whole feedback of everything. Yeah. Obviously, there's going to be games that are, you know, possibly, you know, much better, much more realistic in a lot of respects. But, you know, every game I think is a series of kind of concessions away from the specific reality of something. And you really just move towards getting the feel of something right. And so, like, you know, think about a game like Death Stranding.
Yeah.
You know, I love to joke around, call it Norm Reedus's extreme hiking simulator.
Yeah.
But, you know, the important thing was not to necessarily make it feel like you're exactly walking around and they get every little bit of locomotion right.
Yeah.
But ultimately, they turned one of the most basic activities that you've ever put into a game, and, you know, by the accommodation of being a porter and carrying around all this stuff, they made a really interesting, fun element to this weird, expansive, also super spiky game.
Yeah.
Out of just kind of maximizing down one thing. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Making walking feel like a really significant and important thing, I thought was just a super cool, interesting decision in that.
Normally it becomes something that gets so minimized. Like,
Yeah.
you know, even kind of thinking back to like some of the Zelda games where they put in auto jump and stuff like that.
Right.
And, you know, I was also one of those players who was like, wait a minute, I liked being the one saying I get to jump now.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
You know, sometimes as designers and developers, we try and really like kind of suppress the decision making that you need to make as a player to do certain stuff. So when something gets really easy and really automated, we're taking away the friction with that, so we can make it something that you can just focus on everything else. There's plenty of other stuff to do. This is not the cherry on top, is walking around.
Yeah.
In a game like Death Stranding, it was very, very central.
Yeah.
In our game, the bike handling is the most core moment-to-moment thing that you do. And so, we had the initial demo, and we've got the TikToks of us kind of putting around on and the feel of it. And again, the great thing about the demo is we got validation of the general idea.
Yeah.
Was this a direction that we could go? Was there a game that we could make out of this? Was there something fun enough that we could do if we just kind of improved a few of the core mechanics of this?
Yeah.
So crucially, I think that we really did. I made there was like the initial demo, which had a long ways to go. I made a secondary demo, which was a little more physics based and a little more kind of designed to give us, some of the feel that we had wanted. And, again, I think I'd started with some assets as a starting point, and then we got something that was feeling generally better. Had a few things that really needed to improve in terms of just overall stability, in terms of like how it ran in the world.
Oh, I forgot about that. Oh God, that was the first iteration that we had that was felt actually pretty good. To the feeling was it was a good start in terms of feeling, but then we had the issue that when you would change elevation, I think, and because it was a physics-based model, you would change elevation, one of your wheels would lose contact with the ground, and you would just spin out, even though you didn't. That was the experience from the player's perspective was I didn't feel like I did anything wrong, and I crashed, right? Which was obviously not even if in the world of physics and.
No, you don't understand. You couldn't turn. You were hovering slightly over the ground.
Yeah.
Well, and honestly, we're making a game about motorcycles. We've kind of in a lot of respects with this game, I think we've put the bumpers on.
Yeah.
But in a way that enhances people's agency, allows people to take risks, and allows people to kind of push the envelope to where we wanted them to be.
Yeah.
And so all of those affordances and accommodations and all of that stuff is really just there to give people a degree of comfort that they can actually do stuff. Even though the bike now is a marvel of physics and engineering, not fully possible
in reality. I mean, and that for me, kind of in keeping with the like vibes-based idea of the game, was key, right? I did not want to make a motorcycle simulator, right? Where we're simulating and modeling, like,
You can still, don't worry, you can still die.
Yeah, you can definitely still die. I mean, it's still hard, but it's not necessarily hard because of finicky, realistic physics, right? It's hard because you want to go it kind of pushes you to go faster and faster, and you lose control at a certain point.
Yeah. Well, also, because of the procedural generation, you never know exactly 100% of what's coming.
Yeah.
So there's a few things that in general, I think when we got to the more complete version of this, it really is the layers of this that work to give you everything you need. So initially I knew I can rework the physics of the bike and got something that was both physically more accurate, but gave me a few handles to cheat with.
Yeah.
So, I had a few more contact points for the tires.
Right, the bike actually has 4 wheels, right?
Well, no, it has six potential contact points depending on the state that you're in, which actually is kind of true. Like when the reason why motorcyclists wear the thick knee pads and stuff like that, they're grinding their knees into the ground.
Yeah.
So, that's not too far off of reality. I don't simulate all of the kind of gestures that a rider goes through, which have a remarkably high impact on what happens. But I simulate it with the animation states. I got the setup of the bike working, so there's spring compression and other things like that are
Yeah.
actually, they're tough to see, but they are there.
Yeah.
You can see yourself like, working the controls, especially on the controller.
Yeah.
The other thing that makes a big difference was finally getting the rest of the sounds in, so we could get feedback from the wheels.
Yeah.
And finally, one of the last things we did was just starting to throw in basic road controls, the retroreflective signs, that other stuff, giving people any hint at all about what was coming next.
Because
Yeah.
initially it was just like
These guys.
a very glitzy world. No idea what was
No
going
idea
next.
what was happening,
And it was
yeah.
just like, oh, well, bonk.
Yeah, no, totally. No, these were actually added pretty late in production, which I definitely think helped and made it more drivable. And I do think I don't know if this is like a basic observation, but this definitely came through for me, was how important the sound was. Pretty early on, we started a closed play test for our folks who had financially backed the project through the NFT sale. And we definitely got some feedback, like it feels too floaty, it doesn't feel right, And I think the bigger turning point on that was actually getting in the tire screeches, the sounds of the bike interacting with the road, which I felt too. Like if you hear a sound when you brake, you hear a little irk, like it just makes you feel like you're in control, right? Even though the actual handling hasn't changed, right? It's just that feedback helps people to feel like they're really doing it, and that when you give an input, and this is kind of basic game design juice stuff, right? That like when you give an input, the game should give you something back. But it was interesting to me the extent to which it made it feel like you had more control, even though actually nothing had really changed.
I think that's a crucial bit of the psychology of just game development.
Yeah.
If you really want to, like, especially if you have stuff with like a lot of stakeholders, like if you're doing milestones and showing this to people, and you really want to have people not like what you're doing, if you really want to fail those tests, just omit certain things and you'll blow it.
Yeah.
Even when you're making experiences, this is why like I try and favor vertical slices with as much of the baseline content, even if it's not as good as it could be or should be.
Yeah.
Just having stubs in, just having little bits and pieces that you can chew on gives you a much better idea of where you're going to overall.
Yeah.
And, it's also one of the things that like I was proud of as we kind of like got all the layers of this going. Night Run felt much, much better with each new layer of things that we added to it. So even in a sparse game, without a huge amount of mechanical depth and not a million things going on, there's still a lot of things that you have to do and do right to make something feel good.
Yeah, totally agree. And I do feel like I'm pretty happy with the approach that we took in terms of doing the closed play test. I mean, we probably had maybe 50 people playing, and then probably maybe 5 or 10 of them gave like active feedback, some of which was really...
We got the most important feedback. 5 minutes I bored.
5 minutes I bored. That was a classic from Twitter. Somebody yes, that was a classic. We definitely, that was encouraging during production, right? We put it was relatively raw when we put it in front of, but we put it out
Very raw.
pretty early, and getting that continuous feedback of like, it feels better, definitely helped us to validate like, okay, it feels better to us, and our players are getting it and feeling the improvement.
I think we're really lucky in the way that we get to kind of develop kind of out in the open and just let people have an experience where they can be an active part of it.
Yeah.
Is one, it's really good feedback for us. They get to feel like they have, and honestly, everybody that gave detailed feedback.
Yeah, no, I mean, we were actioning it. Yeah.
If people are going to take the time to give your tiny little art-focused game a bunch of really solid, consistent feedback, it's just a way of showing respect and care for the time that they took to do it, to just make it a priority and figure out you know, within the kind of scope of what's possible. Obviously, there's always going to be people that don't fully understand development or don't know what you're shooting for, but everything that we could action that did make sense and that was just good feedback, even if it was a deviation from our initial plan, I think we went really far to make sure that we did incorporate that stuff and go as far as we could with it. And I think it made a very good impact on the overall experience.
Totally agree. And actually, one of the key things, I mean, you can see it a little bit here if you pay attention, was the camera, right? The camera and the animation of the player body, like you can see as I'm kind of weaving, you can see that we have this basically delay for the camera, or that the camera is leaning. It's not actually a delay, it's actually an animation. We started off with like a delay-based approach in Cinemachine, but just having the bike moving in the frame of the camera and getting this kind of feeling of being able to lean over, I think also made it feel like you were more in control than maybe you actually were.
Well, the important thing on that is I had to completely set up the rig. I had to simulate the animations and get those to a state where they were working right.
And that came in pretty late.
And and so where the camera is really where the rider's head is, or close to where it should be.
Yeah.
And you know, ultimately, like when you're trying to deliver an experience, those layers of verisimilitude, really getting close to an approximation of the experience, makes a big difference in the feel on screen.
Yeah.
If you want it to
Just
feel
the
right,
experience of doing it.
yeah, if you want it to feel right, ultimately it's going to have to largely function in a way that's very similar to right. Because if I had just left a static camera that didn't feel like it was part of your head, it wasn't like a first-person controller, and just left it in the middle, we were never going to get that feel.
Which is what we had for a good chunk of production. We had just a static camera. And the one other key thing that really helped the game to feel faster, two things were, this is actually a Cinemachine camera, although we're barely using the Cinemachine features, but two things we are using is the noise, a little bit of noise on the camera that I think it ramps up as you go faster, giving you a little bit of jitter, and then the field of vision of the camera like widens out the faster you go, and you can tell because you can see more of the gas tank and stuff, and that definitely. And that was actually something that somebody in the Discord, one of our players, had recommended, which was a good suggestion, and that we took on board and used and made it feel a lot faster. So yeah, that's kind of some thoughts around how we approached iterating on and getting the right feeling for the bike and its movement and its handling. In the next segment, we're going to talk about the online high score system and the back end of the game and how we implemented that. So stick around, drop us a comment if you have any questions or thoughts sparked by this. Drop a like on the video. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you in the next segment.